In today's story, I want to share an experience that still feels unreal to me. Something that started with nothing more than a simple delivery mix-up. The kind of thing you'd expect people to handle with a quick conversation or maybe a polite knock on the door. But instead it turned into a long and frustrating encounter with a neighbor who believed every inconvenience in her life was a personal attack, and who didn't hesitate for a second before involving the police over something as ordinary as a package being dropped at the wrong doorstep. It all began on a quiet weekday afternoon, the kind where nothing special is happening and you're just going about your routine. And I was working from home, sitting near the window that faced the front yard, when I received a notification on my phone from the delivery app saying your package has been delivered. I had been waiting for that delivery all week, a replacement part for my computer that I needed for work. So as soon as I saw the notification, I got up, walked to the front door, and opened it with that small sense of relief you feel when something you've been waiting for finally arrives. But when I looked down at the doormat, there was nothing there except sunlight on the concrete and a few dry leaves moving in the wind. At first I thought maybe the driver left it off to the side, so I looked around the porch and then stepped down the stairs and checked near the bushes. But there was no package anywhere. And when I opened the delivery photo attached to the notification, I realized what had happened. The driver had taken a picture of the box sitting on a porch that looked almost like mine. Same beige walls, same gray tiles, except the plant pot in the picture wasn't mine. And right then I recognized it as belonging to my neighbor across the street, a woman named Karen who had moved in a few months earlier and who had already become known in the neighborhood WhatsApp group for constantly complaining about things like kids playing outside, cars parking close to her driveway, and dogs barking for more than a few seconds. I figured it was an honest mistake, something that happens all the time with similar-looking houses, and I thought the most normal solution would be to simply walk across the street, ring the bell, explain the situation politely, and retrieve the box. But the moment I stepped off my porch and started toward her house, I remembered the stories other neighbors had told, how she would glare out from behind her curtains, how she treated every unexpected knock like a threat, and how she once shouted at the mail carrier for setting letters too close to the edge of her mailbox. And even though I tried to brush off those thoughts, I already had a small uneasy feeling in my chest. Still, I needed my package, so I crossed the street, walked up to her porch, and slowly reached toward the doorbell. And just as I was about to press it, I noticed my box sitting neatly beside the door, the label clearly showing my name and address, which meant anyone reading it could see right away that it didn't belong there. I rang the bell and stepped back to give space, and after a few seconds I heard quick footsteps inside, followed by the sound of a deadbolt unlocking, and then the door flew open so abruptly that it hit the stopper on the wall. Karen appeared in the doorway with this tense, suspicious expression on her face, like she was already prepared for confrontation, and before I could even speak, she crossed her arms and said, "Can I help you?" in a sharp tone that made it sound like I was trespassing. I smiled politely, pointed to the package, and explained that it had been delivered there by mistake, that it was actually mine, and that I just wanted to pick it up. But instead of simply acknowledging the error, she narrowed her eyes, glanced down at the box, and then looked back up at me as if I was trying to trick her. She said, "Well, it was delivered to my address, so technically it's mine until the carrier fixes it." And for a moment I thought she was joking, but her expression didn't change at all. I stayed calm and told her that the address label clearly showed my house number, and I even pointed out the line where my street name was printed, but she refused to look closely, insisting that she didn't trust strangers trying to take packages from her porch. Even though she had seen me around the neighborhood many times, I offered to show her the delivery notification on my phone, the tracking number, even the photo that the driver took. But instead of taking me up on that, she stepped a little closer and said in a loud voice, "I don't know what you're trying to pull, but I'm not handing anything over." And then, before I could respond, she reached down, grabbed the package, and took it inside, slamming the door shut in my face so hard that the sound echoed across the quiet street. I stood there in disbelief, trying to process what had just happened. It was such a small, easily fixable problem, yet she had turned it into a territorial standoff over a box that didn't even belong to her. I took a deep breath, walked back to my house, and decided that I'd give her a little time to calm down before trying again. But only a few minutes later, I heard police sirens faintly in the distance, growing louder as they approached the neighborhood, and my stomach sank with the realization that somehow, unbelievably, she must have called the police. Sure enough, two patrol cars rolled slowly into the street and stopped near our houses. and the officers stepped out, scanning the area, while Karen came marching out of her front door dramatically, pointing straight at me as I stood on my porch, saying loudly, "That's him. That's the guy who tried to steal my package." The officers approached calmly, clearly used to exaggerated calls like this, and one of them asked me what was going on. So I explained the situation from the beginning, including the delivery mix-up and my attempt to retrieve the box. I showed them the notification, the tracking details, the delivery picture with her porch clearly visible, and both officers examined the information carefully. One of them nodded, then turned to Karen and asked her to bring the package outside so they could verify the label. She hesitated for a few seconds, almost like she didn't want to give up control of the situation, but eventually she went back inside and returned with the box, holding it tightly against her chest as if it contained something priceless. The officer politely asked to see the label, and after reading it aloud, my name, my house number, my exact address, there was no room left for argument, and he handed the box to me, saying, "This clearly belongs to him," instead of apologizing or acknowledging that she had made a mistake. Karen immediately shifted to another complaint, saying she felt threatened. When I rang her doorbell, claiming I had behaved aggressively, even though all I did was politely ask for my own package, the officers remained professional and calm, gently reminding her that calling the police over non-emergencies consumed valuable resources, especially when something could have been handled with simple communication. But she kept defending herself, insisting she was protecting her property, while I stood there feeling a mixture of frustration, embarrassment, and disbelief that a minor delivery mistake had escalated into a full-blown neighborhood spectacle. Eventually, the situation de-escalated, the officers left, and the street went quiet again. But the moment I stepped back into my house and finally held the package, that had caused all this chaos. I couldn't help thinking about how some people are so deeply distrustful and defensive that they assume the worst in every situation, even when the truth is right in front of them. I didn't want revenge, and I didn't want to drag the issue further. But the experience stayed in my mind as a reminder of how fragile neighborly trust can be. Over the next few weeks, I noticed that Karen avoided eye contact whenever we happened to step outside at the same time. She never apologized, never acknowledged what happened, and instead acted as if I was the one who caused trouble. I decided to move on, because sometimes peace comes from accepting that not everyone is willing to reflect on their actions or admit when they're wrong. But I also made a quiet promise to myself that if another misplaced package landed on my porch one day, I'd handle it the exact opposite way, with kindness, communication, and a little patience. Because a small act of understanding can prevent a situation from becoming a story like this one. A story about how a simple mistake turned into an unnecessary confrontation, simply because one person chose suspicion over empathy.